Hi, everyone. Today we are going to do a run through of the presentation that we gave during our open house, our second open house ever. And so some of the information will be past tense, but it's all relevant and up to date. Great. So a little bit of context, Cassie, if you go to the next slide, behind the open house. So we're kind of framing it a little bit like an annual meeting or a board meeting, you know, that kind of thing where a group of people get together once a year or semi-regularly and go over things that have happened. So taking that concept and of course in the hologram style, turning it on its head. So it's gonna take elements of that. We kind of in the open house heard about lots of different things that the hologram has been up to and all of the individuals in it kind of in the last year. But of course it is also nothing, and it was also nothing like a board meeting. But yeah, that's a bit of framing to what the open house is. And if we go next, we can see the agenda. This is an outline of what we talked about. So we started by looking at some receipts, looking at some political agendas, giving an overview of what has happened since the last open house in 2021. So that is what we're going to go through today in this recording. We then spent about 5 minutes talking about familiars, facilitators, organizers, incomers. So basically mapping out the different flows of people and labor and knowledge in the hologram. And that will also be included in today's recording. So in the live event, which happened earlier, well, at the end of last month now, November, we then had a quick break and we went straight into hearing from different people, starting with past projects. So all of these presentations kind of that go over the past projects, current projects, and future projects, they were rapid. So we only gave each person about 2 minutes to give a brief overview of what they had been working on. So again, we looked at the past projects, things that have already happened. We had a little wiggle break. We then looked at current projects, so things that are happening at the moment. And then following a break, we looked at the future projects, things that are just starting or we intend or other people intend to start in the future. After another wiggle break, we then kind of shifted to the last part of our open house, which was facilitated and led by Lyra. So they kind of did a beautiful exercise with us where we looked at some of the patterns and some of the wishes and some of the ideas, themes, words, all of that type of thing that came up through the rapid presentations. And kind of following that reflection of 30 minutes, we did a very brief invitation to upcoming events. And then we did a closing exercise. And that is an overview of all of the things that we did in our live open house. I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, well, Cassie, if you want to go back, actually, maybe it's worth noting that we did set the intention that we wanted it to be a very celebratory kind of event, mood, vibe, whatever you want to say. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying around it not being a board meeting at the same time. You know, I think we did speed through a lot of things, but we did want to kind of celebrate all of the things that everyone achieved in the last year. So that was our mood. And I don't know if we can convey that in this recording, but we will try our best. And then now I think we are ready to go to the next slide.
All right. Yeah, so we last year we looked at kind of the origin story of the hologram, and Cassie gave a presentation about visiting the Greek clinics and then doing all kinds of experiment, like especially in the US and elsewhere, with that led to what we now know as the hologram. But so this year we decided to kind of talk about where we come from and what do we want from a slightly different angle. You can go next. Because to look at this map where the hologram appears now and where it came from is one thing. But we think that the biggest kind of change that happened, and we can go next, in the past year and a half, 2 years, was that the hologram changed from something that we talked about to something that we do. And it is more of a practice than anything else. And the way that we practice also is our political agenda. And so this is going to be the framing of this whole presentation. Okay, next. And as I said, the same way as the protocol of the hologram can be kind of like seemingly it is very simple, but actually each one of the steps is really thoroughly thought through and is there for very specific reasons. We are trying to do the same within the organizing of the hologram. So really go from the inside to the outside and really pay attention to how we do things. So for our kind of bigger goals to come out of that. We can go next. But to know what we actually do, we prepared some receipts for you of what has happened in the past year and broadly in the 2.5 years. Cassie?
Yeah, I got demoted to becoming the accountant. So now I just make receipts. And so you'll see linked below the hologram receipt, which has a list of all at the top of the receipt, you'll see a list of all the things that we've done this year. And then you can see like the earlier receipt from the last time we had an open house, which was a bit over a year ago. And it includes like workshops and presentations and events and some of the things that some of the sort of inventions of the hologram and how many times we've practiced it. And I'm going to go through some of those things now as well. Maybe. Okay, so I think what we realized is that one of the most important things that we have figured out, and one of I would even say that we've kind of mastered on a certain level, is how to teach a really good online or in-person course. But most of our courses so far have been online besides one. And so ultimately now we've taught 7 courses, and little by little, we've had more and more different people teach the courses. But since our last open house, we've taught 3 courses. One was in Newcastle and it was in person, and it was taught by me and Lita Wallace. And that was a real experiment in how to teach an in-person course. And it was called How to Build a House Out of People. And it was really focused on how do we build trust together when we've been alone for a long time in lockdown and in the pandemic. And the next one was taught by me and Magda and Alex, who we created a course that was online this spring. And like many of our courses, well, all of our courses have a kind of theme. And this one was about trying to bring together people who work a lot on care, whether it's giving or receiving care, whether it's professional or not, and then people who consider themselves strategists. We wanted to see what it was like to fill a space with these 2 ways of thinking and identifying and see how they could help each other. And that course was online, and each of the courses has about 30 people in it. And then the last course that was taught was by Alex Navarrete, same Alex that taught with us in the second one that I mentioned, Lita Wallace and Sage. And this course was meant for people who engage in caregiving inside of collectives. And so it was a lot of kind of hardcore organizers dealing with some ideas about how, after we've realized that identity politics is a pretty tough space, and that we've gotten to share feelings that maybe we've never been able to share before because of identity politics, that we have a lot of feelings and a lot of challenges that are left over. And so how do we organize together when we all hate each other a little bit? And how do we kind of really, really make difficult collaboration a part of our practices? And so this is the last one. And I think the goal of all of these workshops are two things. One is to create the opportunity for more people to just practice the hologram. This is the way we kind of influence the most people to just do it as a practice in their life. And then I love what Magda wrote at the bottom of the slide, which says, to push the hologram further from being a bath salt to being a torch. And so really like creating the situation where we can really like push people to push the hologram and to kind of grow our community. And because we've taught 7 classes or 7 workshops, each one is about 6 weeks and about 30 people attend each one. That means it's like 210 people have tried it. And that means that those people are really the most important people for us to kind of stick with and create community with. And so the one way that we've done that is that we have a monthly meeting that was really originally meant for the people that take courses, as a way to kind of stay in contact with each other as they use the hologram and hack the hologram, and expand it and contract it and change it. We wanted a way to kind of know how it was going for people and for people to stay in touch. So we developed the system like in April or so of 2020, and we've been doing it every month ever since. So we've done it for about 30 times. And now we call this thing the community of practice, and anyone is welcome to come, whether they're trying to set up a hologram, whether they've been doing it for 3 years. You know, maybe when somebody leaves their hologram and it's hard, or maybe when they're like, they have a big disagreement with what the hologram looks like or means. It's a chance for people to kind of like feedback to each other and to the project. And this is how the project changes and grows, because we get to hear what's happening with people in it. And I think a really amazing thing that came out this year of the community of practice is hearing that a lot of people were getting advice in their holograms, even people who are very strong long-term hologram practitioners, like in their own holograms, they were receiving advice from people. And so there were different moments when we really worked together to kind of figure out how to deal with that. And one of the things was that we now have a really like lovely kind of curse/blessing from someone named Stella Lawless, who has made us something that we can say when we're kind of beginning a hologram session, which is that we're not fixing anyone because nobody's broken. It's the systems that are broken. And it's a very simple way of sort of starting a hologram, which means that we don't end up with advice and power dynamics. We facilitated 28 online sessions, so that we call these things minimum viable holograms. And minimum viable holograms are our kind of like outreach tool. It's a way that anybody can kind of show up online or in person and get a facilitated session with an experienced practitioner that takes 2 hours, and they can practice it with 3 friends. And it's a good way to just sort of test it out, to see if they like it, to see if the people that they've chosen are the right people. And it's really easy to schedule. And Hannah here is our administratrix, who is here to help make that process really easy for people. And this has been kind of a big point of growth for us this year. And we hope that next year we'll be able to see if it's possible to make this like more of a public offering. So in 2022, you can see a map here of some of the places where we reached with MVH sessions. We have 28 on record. And then, of course, many of those are feral in the underground, which just means that all of us who practice the hologram constantly get tapped by our friends to facilitate sessions for them. And so that's always happening too. So ask your friends. And I think the cool thing about this is just always going back to numbers, because we love numbers in the accounting department of the hologram. And so every time we have an MVH, it means that we usually have three new people, like three people who are in the triangle of the hologram, who are totally new to the project. And sometimes one or two are familiars, but often not. And so that means that when we do 28 MVHs, that's over 100 people that are now kind of have felt what the hologram is. And as gentle evangelists, this is all very exciting. We have at least at any given time 10 MVH facilitators who are practitioners of the hologram and who do peer facilitation. It's for free because it's actually just really fun. And so we now have kind of a new autonomous way of organizing the hologram MVHs, thanks to Hannah and the crew that works on the facilitation of those things. And anybody that is interested in becoming a facilitator has many chances to next year. We would like to announce that we have now achieved 30 months of researching the depths of why it's so good to ask for help. 30 months of realizing and living by the rule that we always practice the hologram more than we talk about it. And that relates to what Magda said earlier, that we've now for 30 months worked from the inside out, meaning that everybody in the hologram uses the hologram, everybody that facilitates the hologram uses the hologram, and that we organize in a way that has the same care and detail orientedness inside of the way that we structure our like sort of messy, chaotic organization as the hologram practice has in itself. We've taught at least 13 public workshops and more in the making. Many of these were in person and many were online, and we learned a lot since kind of lockdown slowed down. In 2022, this is where we had in-person workshops. You can also see some past workshops and other projects that took place. Anytime really we do a project somewhere, whether it's with another collective or with an arts organization or some sort of academic institution or activist organization, we usually end up teaching a workshop. And this is our way of testing out what we're doing as well, like learning from other groups and helping other people to figure out if they want to practice the hologram. In public workshops, when we do them in person, it seems like the magic number is about 15 people. When we teach them online, sometimes we have even up to like 30 people. But that means that even on the low side, that's like 200 new people who have used the hologram. So the accounting department is very excited about this pure profit. We also, and maybe even are more, it's more exciting to the accounting department that we now have 17 people that have facilitated a workshop, and they're from lots of different parts of the world with lots of different kind of ways into the hologram. And so this is very exciting for a viral project. And I think what we're really learning is like how and why and what it means when we offer the hologram in different geographic locations, and what our kind of internal compass tells us about that, and when that's good and when that's not good, and how to do it to make it good. And I think maybe the most important thing is that now when we do workshops, we don't really do it alone. We always do it in teams. And it really does take a team to hold the type of space that we like to hold, which is a very delicate, strong, like bold and gentle place where people can really feel comfortable trying something out. So 30 months of realizing that our wish and our demand is that all caregivers are cared for, and how that would change everything. Now, if you look in the link below, there is a link that is to a resources page. This page will soon be on our website, but for right now, you have a Google Doc, and that Google Doc will lead you to the book, which you can get online for free as just on the Vagabonds website. You can also ask us at any time for a free PDF, and then we've sold a bunch of copies, which is exciting. And I don't know how many copies, but doesn't mean a lot of royalties. And if you do want to buy a hologram, it's great to support Pluto. So just don't buy it from Amazon, go straight to Pluto's website. Another type of resource that we have been working on in many different ways are more practical tools to help people use the hologram rather than just talk about it or think about it in a theoretical way. And so this is very exciting. Over 2021 and in much of 2022, we played with and built a manual for how to have your first meeting in the hologram. And really like with lots of key intuition and tips for what it means to be a part of it for different people. And that's in 9 languages. And it's been translated mostly by hologram practitioners, and it's available online for free. And it is not listed yet, but if you need a copy in Arabic, we have it. It's just not, the design is just hard. So we haven't shared it very publicly yet, but that is on our website. And then I think the really exciting one that feels like it took like a full 10 years to make was a video that explains the hologram, that shares some of the political ambitions of the hologram, but also kind of explains what it is and how it works. And this is like a really useful tool. I think if you're like trying to share what the hologram is, especially if you want to invite somebody into your triangle, I think this is like so useful because you don't have to try to explain what the hologram is. You can just let the video do the work, because it's always kind of trippy and tricky to figure out which words to use to share with what person about what it is. Yeah, and this is on YouTube. It will soon be on our website, and it's been a fixture in lots of different public spaces so far. And then also on our website now in the familiars section and soon in the resources section, and also will be in the resources, I think it's in the resources page that I'm sharing with you here, but I'm not sure, is a list of audio pieces that me and Magda made, just telling the sort of deeper history of the hologram and who cried when. And really what the kind of eldest ambitions for the project are, which might be fun if you're thinking about getting involved to listen to see how you align with it or not. We've had 30 months of seeing big social patterns and how they change. And something really amazing that I feel really like it's like a very deluxe pattern that I've gotten to see is that a lot has changed since before the pandemic and since the beginning of the pandemic in terms of how people see the hologram, but also how they see mutual aid and care and health. And even some economic ideas have really changed. And I think that many of these things are quite amazing because like before the pandemic, when I would be showing the hologram to different people in a workshop or as a part of a lecture, people like loved it as an idea, but then kind of laughed at me when they realized that I actually wanted it to be real, because there was just a sense that there was just not really time or space for this kind of thing in anyone's life. And I think it's really amazing because now it's like, it's very easy. It doesn't feel like a fight to explain it. And I think that's good for all of us for whatever mutual aid projects we're working on. There's been also lots of changes in terms of just how people approach when we are sharing the hologram in like a course or workshop. There was a kind of really big, deep, scary criticality that came out that meant that we almost felt, especially when I was on my own, I really felt like I kind of had to go on the offensive in order to share it because so many people had so many issues with it on so many levels. And I think there's a real sense of like respect and generosity that has really shifted, which is like so heartening. And the last thing I would say is that it's very specific, but like when we would share the protocol at first, basically 100% of even very radical lefty people would say that they would never participate in the receiving of care without giving it back directly and equally to the person they received it from. And one of the most important parts of the hologram, is that probably all of you know, is that you receive support, but then you make sure that that support continues, but not through you. It's like specifically challenging the kind of individualism and sense of personal responsibility that a lot of different types of like therapy and healthcare and friendships even run on. And so this idea is that like you receive support and then you make sure the people that support you get support, but that's not your job to do that. And it's so different because nobody really fights about it anymore. And it was really like a Stonewall kind of thing at first. Magda.
Hell yeah. Yeah, so we keep kind of circling around this, and we are gonna keep circling around why we do the things that we do, and why maybe the shape of the hologram now is what it is, and what are, especially for the past like year and a half, we have figured out. And by we, I really mean like in the community of practice, people who have come to the hologram once, people who have been in it since the beginning, certain kind of rules, and named some of our instincts about what is important when for the hologram to, like, what is its core, and how in very practical steps that core can like be strengthened so it can kind of shine in the best way on the outside. Next, please. Yeah, and one of the big steps is that that there is a sense of a we, but that we is actually not we, Cassie, Hannah, Magda, and Franz, and whoever. There is when it comes to like organizing and putting stuff on a website, that still might be that, but that this we is kind of really encompassing and spreading out. Because, and we can go to the next slide, you might know that when the hologram started, even at the beginning of the first course, the idea or the thought was that maybe it would just be a protocol, and people learn the protocol and then they go and do it and then teach it other people. But and this is still true. So if we talk about the hologram, part of what we talk about is the protocol. It's a way when one person calls on their 3 friends and asks them for to do this experiment, and if this experiment goes well, of them meeting and these 3 people creating kind of like a 3D picture of this person and supporting them through curiosity, question asking, and generous like reflections and feedback, that then they create a commitment, and through that they create stability and strength as a group, not as the end goal, but so they could like then maybe like go and fuck up some things which they really wanted to do, but they didn't feel like they could dare to do that. But what, and we can go to the next, what we realized, as Cassie was saying at the end of the first course, was that equally important actually ended up being to our individual practices that there is a group of people who are doing this experiment together. And then we can discuss this and we can see bigger patterns across our many holograms. And then we can like remind each other of the important things and also invent together. See, oh, if this doesn't work, like this is how I did it with my hologram, because, you know, we realize this is in this situation, this is what worked for us. And so this is now kind of like, yeah, an equally important part of the hologram is also the hologram's community of practice. Next. And then there appears to now be a third part of what the hologram is, and then we can call it the hologram as a project or something, but it is this viral network of people who are invested in this protocol, and not just to do that in their own lives, But exactly because, as I said, this stability and strength and health that it can create can help us then mobilize and do other things and fulfill the big political agenda the Cassie named, which is for all caretakers to be taken care of. Yeah, and so in this viral network of people who kind of like facilitate the hologram and maybe share it more publicly at times, we have also figured out some things, and this is what we want to share with you today. What we have been attempting, as you know, since last open house as a project together, is this big thing called decentralization, which can sound ambivalent, but it is really practical for us next. Because the hologram is meant to be a tool to tackle our individualism. That is the thing. And so equally, we want to save the project of it from the individualizing forces of the art world that it came out of, but that can be the academia too. And just really know why we are doing this. This is part of what the decentralization means for us. Part of that is that we are trying to make the project accessible so that people can understand and use and hack it. And we want to support people to use it in their own communities, in their own ways. But which also means that we want to create the time and space for them to engage with it deeply so they understand this kind of core, the ideas behind it. So then they know what they're carrying to their communities and what parts should change when and how and what should stay the same. We are in the process, all of us, again, more than 3 of us, to form a network of support between people who use the hologram, and to, ensure all caregivers are cared for, destroying capitalism. Oops. And probably many other things. But this is the big mission of the project. And we figured out what this might mean when it comes to kind of passing the project on and presenting it in public.
I got too excited about the user spell. So we've collaborated with a lot of people, and the hologram is, like, as Magda's saying, it really is a big kind of messy, rhizomatic network of people that keep it going, like as an idea and as a practice. And from some difficult collaborations that we're happy to have had and moved on from, we ended up with like some really important learnings about like what it does take to share the hologram well. Because I mean, if like any like free software or like open source anything, like anyone can use it, but there's only certain ways that it's going to really work well and thrive. And I think we want to make sure that as we pass the project on into the world, that it's not just a protocol, but that it has a connection to really radical politics and really thoroughly good wishes for the world. And so these are some things that we've written up in something called a user spell. And this is going to be also in the link below. And I'm going to share a couple of my favorites. It's my favorite parts. Maybe. It begins by saying that, as I shared before, the thing that Stella shared with us is that it's the systems that are broken, not us. So we're here to become stable and healthy. so that we have the energy and capacity to destroy systems that harm us and dream of new ones. And so you are, if you're watching this, invited to use the hologram as a practice for individual and collective transformation, for the redistribution of care, and to learn. And if you want to do that publicly, there are some really important things to remember. So everybody that shares the hologram publicly practices it in their own life. That means like we all have a triangle and we meet with them regularly and we make sure that they have care as well. And so if you don't yet have a triangle set up, it wouldn't be a good time to start sharing the hologram publicly. But when you do, then it's a good time to start, because we feel like in order to really support other people, you need to know the practice. Going along with that, we use the practice more than we talk about it. We don't want it to be an abstract theory that can, somehow create more hierarchies in the world. We really want to dismantle hierarchies, and we believe that the practice does that more than talking about it. When we share or facilitate the hologram, we really mean it as an opportunity, of course, to share the skill, but I think it really, really works best when it's opening a chance for collaboration with other people, finding solidarity maybe between people that might not have it otherwise, and building networks. And it's always a chance to learn from other people, to find out what they're doing to survive capitalism. It's really important. The hologram is for everybody. But when we decide, like as our little crew, but for anybody that's making this decision, that when we are deciding where to prioritize our energy and where to sort of shine our attention, we really aim to prioritize the care of people who are most hurt by systems of oppression. And while it's very important to support the transformation of powerful people, and we believe that the hologram can actually support people living with a lot of power and privilege to transform, we think that it's more important to offer the support first to the people that are suffering due to that power, before we move up. The hologram is a gift, and it's a part of the gift economy. And so before we, as we imagine our way out of the delusions of capital, we want to use it as a gift for each other. And so it can never be a business. And there's no way that anyone who is practicing the hologram, none of us, nobody should ever be getting money or getting paid for being in a hologram or doing the hologram. Though we're really interested in different forms of radical support to make it possible for people to do the hologram. So we're not afraid of using money to make it possible for people that might not otherwise be able to receive support. But there's a really big line, and nobody can be paid for their time doing the hologram. It really needs to come out of desire. The hologram is first and foremost based on the production of solidarity and health. And that means that we have a little bit of a different sense of time. And so we aim to not be rushed to move at the speed of capitalism or institutions. We've all been taught to do that. And so this is a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. But if we move forward with our relationships together, the projects go better. And I think sometimes that means saying no to different types of institutional opportunities. And I think that that's okay. This is my favorite. We believe that if you actually try to practice the hologram inside of a corporation or other toxic hierarchical structure, we actually think that either you won't be able to do the practice, and if you do, it will naturally destroy the harmful systems of reality maintenance. And reality maintenance are the ways of being that reproduce racial capitalism.
Yeah, so there's kind of a lot that we have talked about, and so we want to take a moment to just map out how kind of people enter into the hologram, into the practice, into the organizing, and kind of who does what in this house of ours. So if you go to the next slide, Cassie, there are lots of different ways, as I'm sure you've gleaned, that people kind of come in and are working and are involved. We hold sort of three buckets really at the moment. Incomers, people who are new, who are coming in. We have familiars, people who have had some involvement. Maybe they've taken a course, maybe they've done an MBH, and so they know the protocol and they're aware of what we do. And then we have organizers, people who spend more of their time and kind of put labor into the hologram. And that looks like a lot of different things. But if you go next, Cassie, we can see that kind of three main ways that people come into this practice and learn about and practice this practice. So one of them is MBHs, and we have kind of talked about what those entail, but this is kind of an area that we're really focusing on going forward as a way for people to come in and to practice. Courses, again, we've talked about that, and that remains important, and workshops, which we are doing a lot more of. And then if you click next, Cassie, some other things that happen, one of which is the practice portal. And so practice portal is not just for incomers. Practice portal is for incomers, familiars, and organizers. It's an opportunity, kind of what it says on the tin, to practice the protocol. And so the fact that it is incomers, familiars, organizers, everyone together is a really important part of what makes the practice portal, because we are all practicing. And so those happen regularly throughout the year as well. And then locals. So there's different ways that you can kind of describe this hub clinics, and it's different for the different locations, but there are two areas in particular: Berlin in Germany and Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK, who have groups of people that are practicing the hologram, and have different ways that they organize kind of communities of practice locally, or engagement with local organizations. Again, that looks different for those different locals, but that is a way that incomers, familiars, and organizers engage with the hologram. And then if you click next, community of practice, we have touched on this as well, but co-prac is essential, and it is mainly engaged with by familiars and by organizers. So, as was said, this is the kind of chance for people to discuss, bemoan, hack, whatever else, the practice. And so that's something that people kind of naturally tend to come to after they have been involved in one of these things, MBH, a workshop, a course. And the kind of next stage, if you click next, Cassie, we have areas that sit in the kind of familiars and organizers zones. So last year, at the open house, one of the zones that was talked about are universes. And so that included groups called the Fumblers, the Accessibility Caucus, Fugitive Planning. And so all of these things have, morphed a little bit in the last year, and a lot of these things are still happening. But if you click next, Cassie, you'll see that they don't exist as their own kind of bucket in the same way anymore. And so as we stand right now, our main two areas are kind of projects and there's a lot of different projects, like we heard about in the open house live, a lot of things happening. For example, Roston is working on a guide to running courses. Stella is working on hologramming money and all of the things that that means. So again, lots of different projects that predominantly familiars and organizers are working on. And then we have the working groups. So these are the MVH facilitation working group. So that's made up of the facilitators that Cassie was talking about, people that facilitate the MVHs, and that working group meets regularly to discuss all manner of things related to the MVHs. And then there's the course facilitators working group, which similarly, group of people that facilitate the courses who meet and discuss and plan and concoct and all of those things. So those are the kind of organizer, people that are putting in more time and labor to the hologram. And then if you click next, you will see 4 little floating spheres. So this is the core group of organizers. I think we've dubbed ourselves the OO, which is after our weekly meetings that we host, which are the open office hours that everyone and anyone is welcome to come along to. So the core organizers, we have 2 co-pilots who are Magda and Cassie. We have a Berlin clinic coordinator who is Flo, and then we have the MVH administratrix, which is myself. And so while, we have kind of specific things that we tend to, we will also dot around across all of these different areas that I've just been talking about, and that looks different week to week, month to month, and that's kind of where they're holding some of the behind the scenes or the admin bits and pieces together as well. And then if you click next, Cassie, this is a very basic representation of the fact that everything that I've just said is subject to change, and it does change, and these things can't be delineated as neatly as they are in this diagram. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what this all looks like next year in a year's time, but this is a snapshot of where we are right now.
Yeah. So most of the this was the intro presentation, and actually most of the open house we spent hearing from people, as Anna Rose already said, that organize different projects, from course facilitators to people who research the connections between different mutual aid and the kind of systems and the hologram, to people preparing sets of holograms about money, to a group of people that came together impromptu to kind of discuss and work through what it means to have a conflict with an organization such as the organization group such as the hologram, as they did, and hologrammed that, yeah, and many other. I think we had 27 presentations, and I think I would like to sneak in a little disclaimer of the one surprise that we had in those presentations, and that is that slowly as we move in our decentralizing efforts this year, the one big thing that we are preparing is a thing that we call UGH, which would be like a center for any kind of project that is affiliated with the hologram, and that can be a project, can be a course, or it can be somebody wanting to make a movie about the hologram, or a one-off workshop. So we can do more of, so people who do such projects meet monthly, and they support each other in doing these projects. So more of this kind of knowledge and instincts that are part of doing a project with or around in the proximity of the hologram get passed on. And those will slowly also then, together with volunteers, be the people who will be deciding on where the resources of the hologram, from attention to money to knowledge to people's energy, are distributed. So that's what's happening. There'll be a call for projects. Keep in touch. Boom. I think that's the end.
Okay, I'm gonna press